It's a visit seen as a test of the Biden administration's Middle East policy. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrives in West Jerusalem shortly. Top of the agenda, rising tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. Just hours before Mr. Blinken lands, another Palestinian has been gunned down by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. That brings to 35 the number of Palestinians killed just this month. Mr. Blinken's visit comes as Israel enforces a series of severe measures against Palestinians after a wave of attacks. It's Mr. Blinken's first visit since Benjamin Netanyahu returned to power as the head of a coalition which includes the far right. Israeli forces have commenced preparing Palestinian homes for demolition. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry says Netanyahu's government's actions are illegal and violate international law.
Well, meanwhile, in an interview with a Saudi-owned television station on Sunday, Antony Blinken said the most important thing in the near term was to try and get some calm. The U.S. State Department said the importance of preserving the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict would also be discussed with both sides.
Look, I'll have more to say about that in the next couple of days. We go there. I think we've seen horrific terrorist attacks in the last couple of days that we condemn and deplore. President Biden has spoken to this. We also see civilian loss of life that is very deeply disturbing. And the most important thing in the near term is to try to get some calm. But I'll have more to say that in the next couple of days. I'll have a chance to speak to the Israeli government, to the Palestinian Authority leadership, to hear from people as well who are being affected by this in their daily lives.
Well, for more on Antony Blinken's visit, we can now cross live to Jerusalem and speak with Arise chief correspondent John Cookson. Good day, John. We're going to get straight into it as, of course, you're live from Jerusalem. What's the mood there, and is there any optimism about the Blinken visit?
To change. There's also a climate of fear in the city. I was down at the old city yesterday, and there's certainly more security forces on the streets. The rabbit warrens of shops and other establishments, many of them were closed. It's a sensitive area, the area of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Wailing Wall, important to both communities here. But the mood is one of resigned hopelessness, frankly, that things are never going to change. Now, earlier today, I was at the Jivat Shahul cemetery, where they're still burying the dead from the massacre at the synagogue last week, and today's burial was Elia Sosowski, a young man aged 25, just a regular guy, a barman, who died when a gunman opened fire. And I spoke to his friends and to his relatives, and they kind of summed up what things are like here at the moment. Let's listen to Shlomo.
Shlomo. Well, I didn't know him for very long. I knew him for about a few months. I started working at the bar that I go to, Access 9. And immediately just stuck out for being vivacious, full of life, always has a kind word for everybody. Seems to be really energetic and optimistic. He always called everybody boss. Said yes boss, no boss. And I thought there was so much, such a rich personality that I could have time to sort of discover it layer by layer.
Now, this loss of your friend obviously is hugely painful. The government says that it's doing something to crack down on violence, and Blinken is here today. Do you think it's going to make any difference at all?
I don't know. I think after, growing up here in the 2000s and that, I think hope for significant change sort of been beaten out of us. It was sort of quiet for a while, and now once again.
Well, John, he travels to the West Bank tomorrow. Now I'm wondering what sort of reception Blinken will probably get from the Palestinian leadership.
Well, Blinken's already been speaking about talking to the Palestinians about the two-state solution. Now, the two-state solution's been kicking around as a solution to this terrible crisis in the Middle East for the last 30 years. And just to remind ourselves, it involves Palestinians having their own state made up of Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, with East Jerusalem of the territory and West Jerusalem to be their capital, and both sides crucially to recognize that the other exists, and that's been the latter has been a sticking point in the craw of both sides. So I don't know, I mean, he's speaking about the two-state solution, but where it's all going, it's difficult to say, and there's not much hope, certainly on the ground, given the situation that we're in, that the mood is right to be talking about this two-state solution. People want a solution, of course, but things are so tense, there's such a feeling of hopelessness generally, that it's hard to know what climate there is here to talk about a two-state solution. The other thing they'll be talking about with the Palestinians is to restart the sharing of information that the Palestinians do about terrorism and other security operations with the Israelis. Now, that was cut off after the Jenin raid last week. I sense that it will in due course be restored. They've cut off relations with the Israelis on this issue twice before and secretly restored contact on two occasions. I think Blinken will try to persuade the Palestinians to restore that good relationship they had on security with the Israelis, but it's a big ask in the present climate.
That's right. Yeah, it seems talking about diplomacy and the negotiations is one way to look at the situation. But when you look at the interview, for example, like what you did with the Shlomo earlier, it puts a human face to the scenario. Now, as somebody who's been on the ground and interacting with people, what are your thoughts on the future of the situation now that you've gotten a first-hand experience of it?
I'm very depressed. I've been coming to this area for a long time now, and nothing seems to change. I was on the White House lawn in 1993 when a peace deal, the so-called the ultimate solution to this impasse, this crisis between Palestinians and Israelis, that was signed, and you know, everything was going to be fine. But then one of the signatories, Mr. Rabin, was assassinated and left a road closed, and here we are 30 odd years later with just the same situation, and unless and until Israel withdraws to its pre-1967 borders, simply is nothing's going to change. And I'm not optimistic at all, because Netanyahu announced a series of measures yesterday which surely will provoke problems down the line, the more building of settlements in the West Bank, gun licenses to be more freely available to Israelis to take action where necessary, and a possible restriction on identity cards and citizenship rights for Palestinians living in East Jerusalem. You know, every which way that you look, you just see a dead end. And the other thing to bear in mind is that with the Ukraine crisis keeping so much attention in Washington, Washington frankly has taken its eye off the ball in the Middle East. And there's one other thing that I would mention. There was a raid, a drone attack in Iran in the last 48 hours, which took out some military installations. Now, Iran is making military equipment, drones, for the Russians, and Iran has, it knows that it's already been sanctioned by this, and suddenly it's been attacked by Israel. And Israel is the only country in the region, the only ally that America has, that can carry out this kind of raid that we saw. It was a bold attack, and certainly sends a very clear message to the Iranians. Not only can the Israelis strike with impunity, but if the Israelis wanted to they could strike at any nuclear facility that the Iranians are developing at the moment. So it's so important for the US to keep Israel on side right now, because it's the most powerful ally that they have in its battle against the development of nuclear weapons by Iran. So bearing that in mind, Netanyahu frankly has a free pass to take extreme measures against Palestinians, and the West in general and the US in particular is not going to do anything to stop them.
Well, John, you pointed out that the West and the US is not going to do anything particularly to handle this. And I also appreciate the fact that you admitted that this has taken a toll on you. You mentioned that you have felt depression to an extent while covering this. But I'm wondering, from an observer's point of view, what you think might be a key missing piece that has not been addressed that could be crucial to this actually coming to an end, even though you've covered this for a number of years.
Look, as in the Russia-Ukraine situation, there needs to be a ceasefire of sorts before peace talks can take place. It needs possibly an honest broker on the outside in this situation. Years ago, it was Norway who played a key role. Maybe the Egyptians can do something to get both Israelis and Palestinians together, talking about trying to find a solution. But the will has to be there before this can even take place, and it isn't. The Israelis, the current Israeli government, doesn't see the reason to stop doing what it's doing of encroaching on Palestinian lands. The Palestinians are so weakened that they can't really do anything about it. They have to, frankly, just keep their heads down and put up with it. So the will is lacking. The people to bring both sides together aren't there. And major powers like the US are hobbled because of their duty, perhaps, to Israel, to keep Israel on side. So every which way you look, it's going to be more of the same. And, you can't blame people wanting to leave Israel, wanting to leave the West Bank and Gaza and find a new life abroad. It is a depressing scenario, and I can't see a way out of it at all.
Yes, unfortunately, I feel most analysts take your stance on that. But Rise Chief Correspondent John Cookson, thank you so much for your time and your insight all the way from Jerusalem.